Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, an interview-style podcast providing insights on how to lead people. Proudly brought to you by Human Interactions Australia. Hi, and welcome to Leadership Unlocked. Very excited today to have Jason Lowe from the Association of Payroll Specialists with us today. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Craig. Great to be here.
Awesome. Tell me, we always give a plug straight up, so tell us a little bit about, as we know it, TAPS.
TAPS, yes, the Association for Payroll Specialists, is all about keeping payroll people up to date with all the important legislation that they need to know to get their job done. So they join our company and then they get a weekly newsletter. We run conferences and seminars and training courses and have a helpline. So just everything to get them all over those tricky legislative questions. You know, exciting stuff, superannuation, workers' comp, fringe benefits tax, the stuff that you love.
I'm
Craig.
excited.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Can we talk about that?
Probably not today, but
all right.
anyway. And I've been fortunate enough to speak at some of your conferences over the time, which has been fun as well. And you get a good number of people at these conferences often, actually.
Yeah, we do. And it's always good having you there.
Thank you.
Because we know we've seen in the papers, if you get your payroll wrong, you don't want to be on the front page of the paper for underpaying people $300 million.
Yeah,
So it's important
There's
work.
some nice stories that come out there for you
Yes.
guys, haven't it? So you've been with TAPS for some time now. What are you happy to share how long you've been with TAPS?
I am. In fact, just this month I've hit 25 years.
Oh, wow.
And I suppose I've been running the organisation probably for the last 18, 19 years.
Yeah, right. Okay. So you took over from Dad.
I took over from Dad. It started off as a family business.
Yep.
And he got it started and then decided to retire and handed the reins over to me.
Yeah, interesting. I've respected your dad for a long, long time. I think he's a lovely man, and I saw him as quite a good leader. Not to put you on a spot there, but what were some of the great things that he did as a leader when that you've maybe even taken on board yourself? Yeah,
and I've taken a lot of it, on board. He was very much a showman, and I suppose one of the things he really gave me was a lot of his, customer service focus. His philosophy, he'd worked in sales his entire life, and it was all about, hitting the number. And if you didn't hit that number, there were great consequences, and the person we'll replace you with, they'll hit the number. And, he really hated that, aggressive corporate, awfulness about, if you don't hit the number, you're a failure. Yeah. So he wanted to set up an environment which was far more, friendly and family orientated, and that's really what he did. And it was all about, delivering a good service to our customers, and that was number one. We spoke very rarely about the numbers. We focused so much on delivering a good service, and we knew that if we did that, the work would come, and the employees would be happy. Yeah, right.
And the employees were happy. As I said, whilst I feel very fortunate, I've spoken at your conference a couple of times, we also did feel like family being invited to those conferences and some of the dinners and so forth. How did the employees feel around this? What was some of the feedback you get from employees when they feel like they're part of this family?
Yeah. And you're spot on. They were part of a family, and I suppose one of the weird things about our business was, and still is that the tenure is very, very long. Most people stay, 10 years, sometimes, longer. And you look at other organisations where they have, such high turnover. We get people in, we like to think we're very welcoming, and they stick around for a long time. And I suppose really that, even if they're not saying anything, the fact that they're there, says a lot. And, starting as a family business, the focus was very much family, and we treated them, like family. And so many businesses say we're like a family here, and I think it's often a little bit of nonsense, but for us, I feel it was really true.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the downsides of having long tenures is people can get quite complacent in their roles and so forth. So as a leader, how did you handle that, if at all? Did it ever come out that you had to, at some point, go, wow, they've been with us for 10 years, but we need to call this?
Yeah, we have had to do that. Sometimes, those people were getting a little bit older, and we had one lady in particular who was just absolutely lovely. She'd worked her entire career, she had retired, and, within a fortnight she was bored to tears. And she came in to help us out for just a couple of days to get us over a little hump, and those couple of days, led to 10 years with the business. And, she was so happy at the business, she wasn't going anywhere. And got to a point where she just wasn't effective anymore, and there were some health problems with her, with her husband. So we had to have some of those tough discussions about, look, I think it's your time to, to move on. You're focused on other stuff. You've been a wonderful employee. You've had a great career. You've had 2 great careers. Now's the time to, to move on. And at the time, she was very, very upset, and it came as a, a massive surprise. And I'm still in touch with her on a very regular, basis. It would have only been 6 months later. She's like, I didn't get it at the time, Jason, but I understand it now.
Nice.
She was able to have those extra 6 months with her husband before he passed away. And she hadn't even thought of that. She enjoyed her work so much, but she ended up really appreciating the fact that we jumped in and intervened.
Beautiful. You mentioned the word tough discussions, tough conversations, and I'm going to get you to open up and maybe be a little bit vulnerable here. But people have certain emotions that go with those tough conversations before they have them. How did you handle them? What are some of the things that kind of go through your head when you've got to have this tough conversation with somebody?
Yeah, I hate those tough conversations. And let's stick with this particular example. So TAPS actually has a parent company. So I had liaised with our HR manager from our parent company, and we had her fly up from Melbourne to be part of this process, to sit down and talk to this particular employee. And I started the conversation, and I got probably 2 or 3 minutes into saying what I needed to say. I burst into tears. And then the HR manager, who also knew this employee quite well, she jumped into, right, okay, Jason's lost it. I'm going to jump in and save the situation. She got, 10 words into it. She started to cry. There was a point that all 3 of us were in this room, crying. And
interesting.
It really talks about, how much we valued this particular, employee, and how much we didn't want to do what we had to do, but the time had come. So, it's never enjoyable, and, I've had to have several tough conversations throughout my career, and, you agonise about them and you run through them in your head for, days beforehand. But, and it's the big downside of being a leader. Sometimes you've just got to put your big boy pants on and do it.
All girl pants.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's what I'm trying to get at here is that you will have emotions around it, and whatever they are, and whether they're validated or not, you do. It's an emotional situation because I think what ends up happening is the element of the job comes out of it, and now this is me being a person having to give somebody else bad news to another person. And that gets really icky, very technical term. So I know that you're quite keen to learn, and you go to conferences and you run conferences and so on and so forth. You've obviously learnt some leadership stuff over the years. What is some of the stuff that's kind of really stood out for you that worked? We'll come back to the second part of that, which is what's some stuff that you saw, oh, that sounds great, and it just didn't work. But we'll go with what worked first.
Good question. So I suppose my natural style is a fairly relaxed, informal style.
Yeah.
So certainly when you're doing, workshops, and if they talk something along those lines, that's what resonates with you, the most. So I always appreciate, hearing someone who has a similar style to me, and that I can go, okay, yes, I am on the right track. Someone else is doing it, in the same way. But I also love just hearing about the other management styles, because you need to use them from time to time. Although I'm very relaxed and informal, sometimes, you need to be a micromanager, and sometimes you need to be a dictator. So, just having that broader understanding of the different management styles when it's appropriate to use them, I have found really, really valuable.
Yeah, awesome. And has there been stuff that you've learned and you thought, yeah, this is gold, this is the next piece of leadership, a goal that I've come across, and you've got to use it and it just failed, or it kind of blew up in your face, or you kind of went to use it and decided, no, that's not going to work?
Not so much. I'm pretty good at deciding what, I'm going to take away and what I'm going to, eliminate straight away. But I suppose just on that, we did some leadership training not long ago, and it was awful. It was a disaster. Before we all got together, we had to fill out this quiz.
Yep.
And as a result of that quiz, they then sent us our profile.
Yes.
And, I suppose to make it cutesy and fun, they'd given everybody, a description. You're a fire truck, you're a koala, you're the doctor.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what all these descriptions were, and there were 30 of us in the room. And, where are all my doctors? Put your hands up. And I didn't know what a doctor did. And how does a doctor relate to a fire truck? And
a koala
and a koala, I didn't understand the definitions to start with. It was an absolute disaster. And then we'd even ask the guy questions, and he couldn't answer them. It was just so. I think sometimes people try to get a little too creative with their management and leadership styles.
Well, that's an interesting point, because that's something that we are very big on, is using scientific-based diagnostic tools. And there are numerous people out there who've used the fire truck koala, and there's another one that I won't say, and it's all a bit too cutesy, and I think they've tried to maybe simplify it too much or dumb it down too much. But the reality is the scientific diagnostic tools will give you some really, really good data, because they're reliable and they're valid. And so we use DISC all the time, which is just fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
and I love those tools. I was so excited. I did this quiz, because I love learning about myself at the same time.
Yeah.
And what was pumped out was absolute rubbish. I'm a big fan of DISC. It's quite funny. I went to a DISC little training course years ago, and I'd walked in, I hadn't said anything, and he was doing all his blurbs, and I asked a question, and he said, "Oh, you're a high I." And I already knew what I was. I'd done some DISC stuff in the past, and I'm like, "Really? How did he get that? I have not said a word. I asked one question. You're a high I." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." So,
very much a high I you are, Jason.
Yeah.
Definitely the showman as well.
Yes.
I think you've certainly taken that on board from Dad as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So what are some of your leadership tips now? When you think about, you've been 18 years running the show yourself, you've had Dad's influence. What are some of the tips that you've got these days for people?
I suppose the latest one for me, and the one that I've been struggling with, most recently, is at a certain point you need to let go, and you can't do it all yourself, and you have to, be willing to hand stuff over to other people. And when you do that, you also need to remember they're not going to do it the way you do it. They may not do it as fast. They may use a different process. The final product might look a little different than what was, you picturing in your head. And most recently, I've had really had to let that go and, sort of say, well, what they're doing is good. It's great. The customers were very happy with it. The fact that it's not the way that I would have done it, and it took, maybe twice as long as I, had hoped it would take to get to that point. At the end of the day, they did it. It went well. The customer was happy, and I need to let everything else go.
It's really matching then. Is making sure that your expectations of a final result or an end result is clear to these people, and then allow them to have the autonomy to do what they need to do to get there, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that leaders do that well.
No, and I haven't done it well in the past. We had I had a new employee several years ago who'd never really done any formal presentation standing up in front of a group with PowerPoint slides. So I'd given him the project to work on some slides. And it was a 1 hour presentation, and at the end of it, he came back with 80 slides for the 1 hour presentation. I'm like, oh, this isn't going to work, and we sat down, and here's an opportunity where I had to really micromanage and say, right, no, that slide needs to go, and why have you put that in there? And it was quite traumatic for both of us, and we still laugh about it to this day. I remember the time when you went through my slides. And he learned a lot about it, and he says now, yes, that was I didn't enjoy it at the time because you ripped my slide deck apart. I didn't enjoy it at the time, and I was really annoyed and really upset for several days. But he learned a lot from it when he was able to go back and reflect on it later. And I learned a lot from it, that I need to, calm down and not, not stress about, things maybe as much as I did.
So there's an interesting trait that's come out in two stories there, is this, your ability to talk to somebody regarding leaving the business or around their 85 deck slides, 85 slide deck, but then realising later that that was actually a good process. So you must be handling the action within the situation quite well. Something's happening there.
Yeah, I hope so. And I suppose, I'm always going back to, and it's very cliche, how would you like to be treated?
Yeah.
And as I said, my management style is fairly relaxed and informal. No one enjoys having those, tough conversations. So, as I said, I agonise about those a lot before you get to them and say, right, how can I deliver this information in such a way that I'm not going to totally upset and get them offside, but at the same time, we need to make some changes.
Yeah.
And so it's really focusing on delivering that message in the right way.
Yeah. Okay. And what other thoughts on your leadership style and what's worked for you?
Oh, I don't know.
So, have you felt like you've ever been taken advantage of because of the casual?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. We had a guy come and work for us one time, and he would just disappear. Sometimes he'd gone for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and he'd turn up again. And I'm like, "Where have you been?" And he'd say, "Oh, look, I just needed to clear my head. I just needed to, process, come up with a plan, and think about how I'm going to, attack this little project." I wasn't thrilled about it, but being casual and relaxed and informal, I'm like, okay, I'll let this run for a little while, and let's just see how this plays out. If he was going to deliver something that was outstanding at the end of the day, maybe I can work within those parameters. Sadly, he didn't deliver what was, expected, on the occasion, and unfortunately, he didn't make it through his probation, period. So yes, some people will absolutely take advantage of it, and I'll give people a little bit of leeway, but at a certain point you're going to have to say, look, this is not working, and once again those tough conversations have to be had. Yeah.
And how about, what are some things you think you've done in the past that you, for use of a word, regret, or you look back and go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that? Or maybe it's even the same theme as we've had through this conversation already, which is, I did it, it felt crap at the time, but I learned something 6 months on or 12 months on. What can you tell me there?
I suppose another one that is fairly recent, only in the last couple of years. I always thought I didn't have a very expressive face, and that if I wasn't happy with something, people maybe didn't realise that I was annoyed as I maybe was. And I had one employee who was quite new who called me on it. And she could read me like a book. And I didn't even realise that I was doing this. And it's funny, we're doing so much on Teams and Zoom at the moment. And, you can see yourself in that little thumbnail down in the corner. I'm like, wow, I really do pull a lot of faces. And, I was totally unaware of it. So, sometimes, I didn't perhaps, mask my disappointment in this situation, maybe even being a little bit snappy in a situation. And so I'm, focusing on that more. It was funny, I was talking to one of my employees about this, just the other day, about one time that I was a little too snappy. We'd just done a series of seminars all the way around the country, and one of my employees had delivered one section. And so we'd done it 7 times around the country. And then on the following Monday, she came in, to work, and someone had sent through a question on our helpline about her topic, which she'd just spoken about 7 times. And she turned around and asked me, "Oh, Jason, what do we do in this situation?" And it was exactly what she'd taught over the past 2 weeks. And I'm like, "Are you serious?" Just my gut reaction. You can't be seriously asking me this question. And she got very upset, by it. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I need to."
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a comment that I like a lot, and maybe I overuse it, but the comment is, behaviour doesn't lie. Mm-hmm. So in the heat of the moment, your behaviour will do something, whether it's an eye raise or it's a smirk or it's a frown. It's telling us something about how we're actually feeling, what our emotions are. And how do you hide that stuff if that's your natural reaction? I'm not sure you can necessarily.
No. So I'm focusing on that more. But here I'm a little disappointed, Craig. We're highlighting all my terrible leadership traits.
Tell me about your great leadership traits.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily have any, but...
I think when we had that conversation, when I first asked you this, you weren't sure. That was an interesting comment, because I wouldn't have asked you if I didn't think you did. You've been in the role for 18 years. I've seen you as a leader. You've gone through transitions with organisations coming in and TAP's being a part of those larger organisations now. you've had to manage people through that transition and through that change. So there's stuff that you've done. So what's some of the stuff that you've done there that you think has really worked?
Yeah, a good point. Yeah, it surprises you. It's interesting. I was a little nervous about doing this podcast because leadership's not something I think about a lot, and I think for many of us it's instinctual. It's like, hey, what's your parenting style? You do what you feel is right.
Yeah.
And there are so many different ways of doing it. Luckily, what I'm doing seems to work. But I suppose it's interesting, when you think about what's something that's worked just recently, and I suppose COVID has been, a really big thing, and that had to change sort of the leadership style, quite a lot. Overnight, we went from being in the office to, not being together. And my first instinct, and I suppose this is why I was a little nervous about talking, because a lot of this is just instinct.
Yeah.
My first instinct is, right, we're not going to see each other. So the first thing I did is, right, we need to have a daily meeting, and every single morning,
Nice.
and we've done it every day since at 9 o'clock, we have a half-hour meeting just to, touch base. And I know other organisations, aren't doing that, but it's worked incredibly well for us. And sometimes those meetings, we talk about important business stuff, and other times it's just absolutely nonsense. It's like, what are you watching on Netflix at the moment?
Yeah, right.
Because we have nothing else to do. I think that's good, just having that ongoing communication and, touching base with each other as a team. But then even as well, also during COVID, one of the other interesting things that happened to our business is that our helpline increased by 400%. And if you think about it, we're all about getting people paid. So overnight, we had a business that was open and all these businesses had to shut down overnight.
Yep.
The questions just started flying in. How do I pay my employees? What are my obligations? What do I do?
With JobKeeper and so forth, I'd imagine,
Well, then
right?
JobKeeper was the next thing.
Right.
So then they announced JobKeeper, and that was quite a complex scheme. So all those questions came through. A 400% increase in work is massive. And we're answering questions about things that have never happened before. We've never shut down the country before. This JobKeeper thing is totally brand new. So we're learning on the fly, and we're answering questions that we have never heard of before. And the volume is ridiculous. So, I had to make some, quick decisions and say, right, the rest of the business doesn't matter. All those other projects that you were working on, the training course you were writing, or everything stops. We need to refocus our energy on this particular task, which not everybody was happy about. So then you've got to motivate them through, that sort of process.
So I was going to ask you about that, right? Because, when you think of DIST, people have got different reactions, especially to change. So here's a massive change. Some people will deal with it, some people won't, some people will embrace it. As a leader and as a manager, you've got to be able to get everybody on board. You've done the daily meetings, which is great, helps with their, their well-being and so forth. How did you manage some of the ones that really started to stress and really start to... Almost there's a sense of anxiety almost about this for people.
So I suppose in this situation, I look for the positive in the situation, and what can we be grateful for? And those daily meetings, we would talk about how lucky we were, first of all, to have a job. So many people were being impacted by these changes and losing their job, and we were seeing in the news people lined up outside the Centrelink offices and say, right, although this is not the situation we want, let's be grateful that we've got a job. And then to address the issues of volume and, the stress that came as a result of that situation, was really going back to our purpose and saying, look what we're doing at the moment. So many people are relying on us to get them through this incredibly difficult situation. They don't know how to pay their employees. They don't understand the JobKeeper, rules. And who are they turning to? They're turning, to us. And, I feel that we're playing a very important role in the success of their businesses and, the country overall. And we should be proud of what we're doing and how we're helping these organisations. And that went really, a long way with the team. So much so that when we were doing I'm going to brag for a minute, Craig.
Brag as much as you want.
So much so, we spoke about this so much during, our meetings. When I was putting together our year-end seminar last year, I wrote to the Prime Minister's office and said, payroll people have been doing it incredibly tough. We've been working ridiculously long hours. Can you record a 1-minute video thanking the payroll people for what they've done? Never thinking that it would happen. And 2 weeks later, this video turns up in my email and, ScoMo had recorded this wonderful message for the payroll people, and to be able to play that to the team just boosted their spirits like you wouldn't believe. And then a couple of weeks later, we'll be able to play it to all the, payroll people.
Yeah.
It's just such an incredibly nice thing for him to do, but you also sort of validate, all the feelings that, people have been having.
That's incredible story. It's a really incredible story. I think if my observation with you is this, there's a real connect between what you said earlier around we're all about service and so on and so forth. And then when it got real busy in COVID, they said, well, hang on, we're getting to do what we want to do. We don't have to go and chase more members because they're coming to us now. Let's just keep doing it really, really well. And then that element of your conferences and even some of the conference dinners that we've been to over the years, there is this, let's have some fun with this. Let's enjoy what's happening here and be grateful for what's happening here. That seems to be a bit of a theme for you.
It really is. And it's amazing. It came in so early. One of my first jobs was I worked at the local supermarket.
Yeah.
And I'd only been there a short period of time. And there was this old lady who would come in. She was obviously very lonely. I'd be working there on a Saturday. She'd come in the morning and buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
And 2 hours later, she'd come back and buy some milk. And then 2 hours later, she'd come back and buy a little tin of baked beans. She'd been, 4 or 5 times a day. And every time she'd come in, she'd find somebody and stop and talk to one of the staff. And I'd only been there a very short period of time. And I got stuck with it. And she was just talking and talking and talking. And I wasn't doing my job. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw the store manager just watching me. And I'm like, oh no, I'm in trouble. I'm talking to this lady. I'm not packing the shelves like I supposed to. Anyhow, I wrapped her up and walked over to the boss and go, so sorry, I got stuck talking to her. And she said, no, don't be sorry. That's your job. This is all about customer service. The customer is most important. The shelves will get packed, later on. You look after the customers. It's your job to talk to the customers. And she had so many little tricks. If someone even asked, where something was, and I was at the supermarket the other day, I asked where something was, aisle 7. And I'm like, we wouldn't have done that back when I worked at the supermarket. We would take them there. So this one store manager, taught so much about customer service. And I really liked it. And so much so that, I'd catch the train to school or something and customers would come and sit beside me and say hello and have a chat,
Kind of weird, but yeah.
It's good. But, that's how focused we were on the customer. And my dad was very much the same way. He had a philosophy. He says, because he used to sell, one of his first jobs was selling stationery, go door to door, selling pens.
Yeah.
And his boss had told him, and it's a story he used to tell me all the time. And his boss had told him, you're not in sales, you're in showbiz. They can buy their pens from anywhere. You go along, you be nice to them, you treat them well, you put on a little show, and they'll buy the pens, from you. And I suppose it's a philosophy that he always had, he instilled in us, and we, apply it in TAPS to this day. We do the conferences, we put on a big dinner.
It's a show, it's awesome.
It's a show. So much so that it makes people want to come. We treat everybody nicely, we help them with their problems. That's what we're all about. And as I said earlier, we spend very little time talking about, revenue and profitability because that comes as a result of the work we do. And so, our purpose is really to help people.
So there's a theory around customer service type stuff is that there's your external customers and your internal customers, and your internal customers are the people that you work with. So that seems to me like that's really just intuitively, it's just part of your DNA, isn't it? That these people are here, they're working for me, and as a leader, I want to look after them. I want them to, have a good time while they're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on. It is internal and external. We're looking after the customers, but we're looking after our team. I suppose we have some values in our organisation.
Yeah, what are the values?
We are helpful is the number one. Nice. We are knowledgeable and we are accurate. And I suppose people are coming to us, for payroll information that we have to be knowledgeable, we have to be accurate.
Yes.
But we apply it to all parts of the business. Number one is helpful, so we're helping the customers, but we're also helping each other. And so very much as a leader, going back to my, relaxed, style, I don't think of myself as a leader, which is why I was a little nervous about, I'm there to help my team so that we can all succeed.
That's gold. That's a piece of gold right there.
Well, there we go. We had our aha moment.
We've got an aha. But that'll come out, don't you worry. So what other thoughts? What other thoughts do you have? When you think about that term leadership, and you said you were a little bit nervous, what are some of the, I guess your preconceptions about leadership that, or even maybe they've been driven by leaders that you've had that you really liked, or leaders that you had that you didn't like. What are some of your preconceptions about that term leadership?
Big vague question. I don't know where to start on that one. Can I ask it in a different way?
Go with some leaders that you've had that that just didn't click with you. They just didn't work.
All right.
Obviously, let's not give away names.
Okay.
Especially your dad's.
He was the worst. So we had one manager for a while. This is many, many years ago. He had one goal, and that was to hit a number.
Yeah.
And our goal as a business is to hit, let's say it was $10 million this year. That is all he was focused about. And so straight away, it is the exact opposite to me.
Yeah.
I don't care about the number. The number will come. I care about being helpful. Luckily, this manager worked in a different location. But I remember one time he flew in for a meeting. We all had to meet with him and give a little update. So we were in this meeting room with him, and one of my colleagues was doing an update about what was happening in their division of the business. And the whole time he's got his head down. He's not even looking. He's he's typing emails, and he's just listening at the same time, not looking at the slides, which someone obviously spent hours putting together trying to impress him. He's just typing on his email the whole time. And the theme of his presentation was, I had a budget of $1 million. It's going really, really well. We're on track for $1.2 million. Gets to the end of the presentation, waiting for the well done. Our goal is to hit this number. You're going to be ahead of your number. Expecting to be a hero.
Yeah.
He looked up for his computer and said, well, why isn't it 1.5 million? That was his only comment. And then, my colleague answered, and it was like next. And moved on to the next person. And I'm like, what a demotivating,
so
situation.
you're going to say something else then, but yes, but it's demotivating.
And it didn't even happen to me. And lucky, I got off unscathed in that particular meeting.
Sure.
But I'm like, I just didn't like anything about it. I liked that I didn't like that he didn't care about the people. He wasn't listening to the message, and that it was all about, the money. It just everything about it,
But even that behaviour in itself as a leader, now I don't see it often, but I have seen it a few times in my career where we've been doing some work for an organisation, the leaders come in and doesn't want to participate in the training and go, okay, that's interesting. And then they've sat in the back of the room and they're in and out, they're on the phone, they're on the emails, like, what, you're not really espousing great behaviour here at all.
No.
And you're not really showing any connection or link to this training as if it's important for you or not. Yeah. And so again, I believe behaviour doesn't lie. And so here's a behaviour pattern that you go, not overly impressive.
No. Just on that, isn't it interesting how quickly you can see what someone's culture is like and what their leadership style is like when you go in and do training to an organisation. Yeah. You rock up to do this training and they're like, oh, what room are you in? They finally find the room. Oh, that's right, you guys wanted a data projector. Let me see if I can find that. And then the course starts, and at 9 o'clock, nobody is there. And they wander in at 1:15, and have you all got your calculators ready? We're doing payroll today. Oh, do we need calculators? No one told me we need calculators. And whereas you go into other organisations, they're so happy to see you. We've got the room for you. Everybody's there ready to learn.
We've got water. We've got pads. We've got mints.
Yep. And the boss says some nice words about how excited we are, and you feel like part of their company just for the day.
And I guess that is that, for a corny statement, it is that walk your talk. It is, you do what you say you're going to do, and you do what you do. Like that's such an important part of leadership, I believe, as well. Yeah. So interesting.
It's all part of leadership.
And so let's finish on a positive. Think about a situation where you've had a leader and he's just blown your mind and what he's done and how he's done it, and you went, if I could be half as good as him, I'm rocking the world. Okay.
I won't go in particular. Given it's a good story, I might even tell his name.
Go for it.
David Page, who's currently the CEO of Fast Track, recruiting software.
Yep.
I met him probably 12 months or so, and as a result of a company merger, he ended up becoming my leader. But I'd seen him 12 months earlier and was immediately impressed by what he did. And you're always looking at those little things. Oh, they've done that so well. I'm going to steal a little bit of that I want to be like him. So he used to run these breakfast meetings or lunches where he'd have a guest speaker come along. it was a marketing branding activity. You know, you hear the guest speaker and there's a little plug for their business at, you know, at the end. And the things that he used to do particularly well was he knew everyone in the room, you know, and he would work the room, and he knew who were his customers, and he knew how their projects were going, and, you know, you just watch him talk to people, and, you know, he seemed excited to be there. And like you mentioned, there are other CEOs at those sort of functions. You know, they'll rock up right at the last minute, do their little thing on stage and leave again, not want to interact with customers or staff. Or, You know, I was really impressed with the way he sort of led the whole business. But there was one thing he said on stage which really, you know, stood out for me. And at the end of the presentation, he said, so today we've got customers in the room, we've got prospects in the room, we've got employees in the room. He says, I like to run an open organisation. If you're one of our prospects here today, by all means, talk to one of the other customers, you know, in the room. So he was just so open and transparent, you know, and often, you know, when you're dealing with a prospect, I don't want them to talk to this customer, or I don't want to talk to that customer. You know, he would open up his whole, you know, database to, you know, to a prospect. You can talk to anyone. You can meet them there in the room. And he even said on stage, you know, you might talk to somebody who maybe hasn't had the best experience. And you don't always have the best experience, you know, with businesses. He said, but I'd like to think that the way we handle those negative moments, you know, make an impact. You know, so if they're not happy with the service they've received, or, you know, the product that they're currently using, ask them about the service and, you know, how do we handle it. I just love the way he was so open and honest and transparent, you know, and warm and friendly and welcoming. And when he became, you know, my leader, he was exactly the same. And I'm just like, you know, total class, you know, and that's what I really, you know, admire.
Sounds like we need to get him on a podcast.
Oh, maybe we do.
Might have to see if you can introduce me to him and get him on. It sounds like he would have much to offer many people.
I think he would.
Awesome. Jason, it's always a pleasure. I love catching up with you, mate. And you've done some amazing stuff with TAPS, and I'm sure you're going to continue to do that. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you.
On Leadership Unlocked.